Hi, I'm Brian Russell, author of Centering Prayer, Sitting Quietly in God's Presence Can Change Your Life, and I want to answer one of the common objections to the practice of centering prayer, and this is a practical objection, and I'll get into some other objections in future videos, but oftentimes I'll find that students or persons who have just dabbled with centering prayer comment that it's boring. And I find that to be a really interesting objection. And I always invite folks to be curious about why simply sitting in silence is boring. When you look at thinkers from across the ages, philosophers have observed the importance of being able to sit in silence. For example, in the Pensées, Blaise Pascal writes, "I have discovered that all human evil comes from this, man's being unable to sit still in a room." Centuries later, Nietzsche wrote, "When we're alone and quiet, we're afraid that something will be whispered in our ear, and so we hate the silence and drug ourselves with social life." I love both of those questions because they both essentially are affirming how difficult it is at times, especially when you're first getting started, to sit still and simply be confronted with our thoughts. And the fact of the matter is, it's more than just boring to sit in silence. First, let me address the boring part. Modern society, and it's interesting again that Pascal lived centuries ago when didn't have social media, internet, instantaneous access, and all those kind of things, and he still noted the difficulty. But modern society has amplified the distraction level and the noise so that we're 24/7 virtually bombarded with stimuli. That gives us dopamine hits, that keeps us ramped up, that perpetually distracts us. And so the experience of silence, of even sitting with the God who loves us in silence, can be really difficult because our bodies are so charged up. To slow down enough to be in silence actually creates a great deal of discomfort. So I want to say centering prayer is boring at first, but that's a signal to us that we need to really dial down the volume of noise on the inside. And that feeling of boredom is something that we want to be super curious about, because perhaps what we feel and experience as boredom is actually the baseline that we need to inhabit simply so that we can be fully present with whatever work we're actually doing. What I used to experience as boredom has now become kind of a center where I can just experience all of life, all the feelings. I can think more clearly. I'm not simply reacting to stimuli, but in a sense I can respond out of my true center. So we need to get used to that feeling of boredom, but see that as progress towards recentering ourselves. The other piece that's on here is the fact that boredom can also be a mask, because when we're bored, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of the boredom. But in fact, not only is a reset for us physiologically and spiritually and psychologically there on the other side of that experience of boredom, but I want to suggest that deep healing can be on the other side of that as well. Another Nietzsche quote that I really love is this, and it's a little scary, but it's, when you stare at the abyss stares back at you. Again, that Nietzsche quote that I read at the beginning, when we're alone and quiet, we're afraid that something will be whispered in our ears, and so we hate the silence and drug ourselves with social life. I think sometimes that boredom is a defense mechanism, because if you actually sit in silence, you're going to have the privilege, and this is sometimes a scary privilege, of being confronted with our unconscious. It'll download. God can draw those things up, and the opportunity is for us, if we want to have deep healing at an existential level, at a soul level, we have to sit through that experience of boredom, simply so that the junk in our lives, the anxiety, the guilt, the shame, the pain, and even the true things about us can emerge. And then we have the privilege in centering prayer of simply surrendering them to the God who loves us. So, can centering prayer be boring? Yes, but sit with that. It's not an objection as a reason not to do it. In fact, when you begin to feel the boredom, you actually may, just to kind of clone some of Jesus' words, you may be a lot closer to the kingdom than you think. If you have other questions about centering prayer or objections, please reach out to me. You can reach me at deepdivespirituality@gmail.com. I'd also invite you, if you're interested in participating in a monthly free gathering where we talk about centering prayer, do a 20-minute sit together, and then have open conversation, you can sign up for that at centeringprayerbook.com. Be blessed. Thanks for listening.